It all started with a scream, sharp, humiliating, and echoing across the marble-floored lobby of one of the most luxurious companies in New York. "Watch where you're going, you useless maid!" barked Vanessa, the picture-perfect executive assistant with designer heels, icy blonde hair, and a heart seemingly made of solid gold, if gold were cold, ruthless, and weaponized. But this wasn't just any outburst. It was public, loud, and it hit like a slap across the face. Employees froze. The receptionist held her breath, and Mia, the cleaning girl, just stood there, trembling. She looked down, not just to avoid eye contact, but to stop the tears from spilling. What no one realized, though, was that someone else had seen everything. Behind the mirrored wall, just steps away, a pair of eyes were watching, quiet, calculating, and furious. It wasn't security. It wasn't HR. It was Donovan Hale, the elusive millionaire CEO, the man whose name made boardrooms tremble. And yet, there he stood, unnoticed, seeing past the surface of his empire that now suddenly felt tainted. Because what's the point of wealth if kindness disappears in its shadow? As Vanessa stormed off, mumbling about incompetent people and this place going downhill, Mia didn't defend herself. She didn't speak. She knelt back down with silent grace, as if trying to erase her own presence. The janitor cart beside her shook with her hands. But the moment passed, and people looked away. Everyone looked away. Except for Donovan. Something inside him shifted. This wasn't the first time he had seen someone humiliated to make another feel powerful. His fortune had come from the ground up. From sleeping in a shelter at 16 to building a multi-million-dollar tech empire by 35. And in Mia, he saw a shadow of who he once was. That was the moment. That was when the story truly began to change. But the shift wasn't immediate. It began with a request. Later that day, Mia was called upstairs. Not to HR, not to be reprimanded, to the 59th floor, the executive level, marble columns, crystal lights, air that smelled like leather and expensive ambition. She'd never even seen that floor, let alone stepped into it. Her shoes squeaked on the polished tiles as she walked through a corridor lined with oil paintings and thick silence. She thought she'd be fired, that Vanessa had reported her, that her job, her only income, was slipping away. But then came the twist. The door opened, and there he was, Donovan Hale. Imposing, elegant, but not cold. He looked at her like she mattered, like she wasn't invisible. "Sit," he said simply. Her knees shook as she lowered herself into the velvet chair across from his oak desk. "I saw everything," he said. Boom! The air left her lungs. "You didn't deserve that," he continued, his voice low but firm. "And I don't allow cruelty in my company." Mia opened her mouth to speak, but the words wouldn't come. Why would a millionaire care about her? Then came the next shock. "You shouldn't be pushing a mop," he said. "You should be pushing ideas." And just like that, he offered her a position. Not charity, an opportunity, one that would pull her from the shadows and place her squarely into the light. What Mia didn't know was that her promotion would spark more than whispers. It would ignite a firestorm. Vanessa was the first to hear the rumor. She laughed, loudly, sarcastically. "The cleaning girl, working up here? Please, that has to be some kind of joke." But as the whispers turned into meetings, and the meetings turned into emails with Mia's name on them, the color drained from Vanessa's perfectly powdered face. Mia was back, not with a mop, but with a badge. And not just any badge, an executive development trainee tag with full access to mentorship under Donovan Hale himself. That's when the energy shifted. People who once walked past Mia without seeing her now greeted her in elevators. Some smiled too wide, too fake. Others just watched, confused and uncomfortable, trying to process how a girl who once cleaned their trash cans now walked beside the millionaire CEO as his personal mentee. And Vanessa? Vanessa was boiling inside. This isn't happening, she thought, but it was, and she couldn't stop watching Mia rise, faster than anyone expected. Mia didn't let the attention distract her. She arrived early. She stayed late. She asked questions, took notes, studied strategy. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She was trying to prove something to herself, that she was worth more than a uniform and silence. That wealth wasn't just about money, it was about possibility. Donovan watched her closely, quietly. Not as a savior, but as someone who recognized the fire in her. The same fire he had when the world told him he was nothing. As weeks passed, he gave her challenges, projects, presentations. One day, in a boardroom full of men in $1,000 suits, Mia stood with trembling hands, but delivered a flawless pitch. She spoke with purpose, clarity, and a quiet intensity that held the room. When she finished, the silence was followed by slow, surprised applause. That moment could have been her triumph, but instead, it made her a target. Vanessa watched from the glass wall outside. Jealousy bubbled inside her like poison. How could someone with no name, no background, no money suddenly earn this spotlight? That night, she started digging. Old files, background checks, anything to find something. And then, buried deep in a forgotten system, she found it. A secret Mia had never shared. One that could unravel everything. A debt, a legal document, a connection to someone who had once been arrested. Vanessa smiled like a shark. She had her weapon, not a physical one, but something far more dangerous. A story twisted just enough to destroy. The next morning, the whispers returned. But this time, with venom. People stared at Mia again, but not with admiration, with suspicion. Side glances, awkward silence in elevators. Meetings that once included her now accidentally left her off the invite list. Donovan noticed, but he said nothing. Yet, he needed to see how Mia would react, whether she would crumble or rise again. That was his true test, and Mia felt it. The shift, the cold shoulders, the fear of losing what little she'd gained. But instead of hiding, she did something no one expected. She walked straight into Donovan's office and told him everything. She didn't wait for him to ask. She didn't wait for permission. She walked in, stood tall, even if her hands trembled, and said, "There's something you should know before someone else twists it." Donovan paused, looked up, and nodded for her to continue. Her voice shook at first, but she didn't stop. She told him about the debt, the arrest record, not hers but her brother's, about the time she had to drop out of school to support her family after their father disappeared, about cleaning offices at night while studying during the day. She didn't make excuses. She just told the truth, raw and honest, like someone who had nothing left to protect but her dignity. Donovan listened without interrupting once. When she finished, she braced herself, ready for the door to close on her, ready to go back to scrubbing floors. But instead, he leaned forward and said, "You know why I chose you? Because you're honest, because you're resilient, and because no one gets to define your worth based on your past." That moment didn't just restore Mia's place in the company, it amplified it. Donovan called a team-wide meeting. Everyone was there, and in front of all of them, he made a statement. "We are not a company that rewards cruelty. We are not a company that fears struggle. We are a company that invests in character. And if that bothers anyone, this may not be the place for you." The room fell silent, but the message was clear. And Vanessa? She sat in the back, her jaw tight, eyes burning. Her plan had failed. And worse, it had made Mia stronger. But Vanessa wasn't done. She had one more move, one final play that could tear everything down if it worked. She scheduled a meeting. Not with Mia, not with Donovan, with the board. Using twisted concerns about favoritism, misuse of mentorship resources, and corporate image, she framed the entire situation as a liability. Her words were polished, professional, poison wrapped in protocol. If the media finds out a janitor was fast-tracked by the CEO himself, it could look like negligence. Or worse, she said smoothly. The board was divided. Some nodded, others hesitated. But the seed was planted, and within 24 hours, an emergency meeting was scheduled, with Donovan under review. When Mia heard, her heart sank. She blamed herself. But Donovan? He didn't blink. He'd faced worse battles, and this one? He wasn't fighting for pride. He was fighting for principle. For her. For every unseen person who just needed one chance. On the day of the hearing, Donovan walked in with confidence. But he wasn't alone. Mia stood beside him. Not as a subordinate, as a partner. What happened next would shock even the boardroom elite. Because Donovan didn't defend himself with numbers. He defended with truth, and with a story that would change the entire room's perception forever. Donovan stepped forward, adjusting his cufflinks with a calm that made the room go still. Then, he spoke, not like a CEO protecting his position, but like a man with nothing to lose and everything to stand for. "Before I built this company," he began, "I was the boy sleeping in my car. I was the young man rejected from internships because I didn't have a network. I know what it's like to be invisible, and I know what it means when someone finally sees you." The board listened. Some leaned forward. Others glanced at each other, unsure of what was coming next. And then he gestured to Mia. "This woman worked harder for this position than anyone I've ever met. Not because she wanted charity, but because she knew what it meant to earn her place. You want to question my judgment? Fine, but I will never apologize for investing in potential over privilege." The room was silent, until Mia stepped forward. She didn't plan on speaking, but something inside her, something fierce and tired of being small, rose to the surface. She said, "I never asked for special treatment. I asked for a chance. And if this company is only for people who were born rich, then I was never supposed to be here. But if it's for people who believe in building something bigger than themselves, then I belong." Her voice echoed. Not loud, but steady and real. The kind of truth that makes people uncomfortable, because it's impossible to ignore. And something shifted. A senior board member cleared his throat and stood. His name was Harold Klein, a man known for cold logic and tighter budgets. But even he looked affected. "I've spent decades reviewing proposals," he said, "and I've never seen one as courageous as what you two just presented. I vote to keep Donovan in place, and to support Mia's growth path. Anyone disagree?" Slowly, one by one, the board members nodded, even those who had doubted. Vanessa, watching through the glass, knew what had just happened. She hadn't just lost. She had exposed herself, her pettiness, her obsession with control, and worst of all, her inability to recognize real value when it stood in front of her. From that day forward, things changed. Not just for Mia, but for the company. Donovan launched a program called Second Sight, a mentorship track for underrepresented talents. People from cleaning crews, mailrooms, cafeterias, all given a shot to apply, to learn, to rise. Mia became the face of it, and her story spread, first inside the company, then beyond it. Media outlets picked it up, not as a scandal, but as a revolution in leadership. Headlines read, "Millionaire CEO backs former janitor. Here's why it worked." Investors, instead of pulling back, doubled down. But perhaps the most unexpected twist came 6 months later. A corporate gala, lavish, opulent. A room full of gowns, tuxedos, and champagne worth more than most people's rent. And there, in the middle of it all, Mia, no longer invisible, stood on stage to receive an award for innovation and impact. But just as she stepped off that stage, someone from her past waited in the shadows. At first, she didn't recognize the woman standing by the marble column, dressed in a navy silk gown and holding a crystal flute like she belonged there. But then their eyes met, and something shifted. Vanessa. The same Vanessa who used to laugh behind her back, who tried to humiliate her, who nearly destroyed everything Mia had fought for. But tonight, Vanessa didn't look smug. She didn't even look angry. She looked lost, and for the first time, small. "Congratulations," she said, her voice thin, almost rehearsed. Mia held her gaze, steady and unreadable. "Didn't expect to see you here," she replied. Vanessa gave a soft, bitter smile. "Yeah, well, fortune changes fast, doesn't it?" She didn't say more. She didn't have to. The word was already in the air. Fortune, the one she once used to wield like a weapon, now out of her hands. Turns out, Vanessa had been quietly removed from her position weeks after the board meeting, not for her cruelty, officially, but for poor leadership judgment and manipulation of internal policies. The kind of fall that doesn't make headlines, but echoes in whispered conversations at cocktail parties and boardrooms. She'd tried to join a rival firm, but word travels. In circles of the rich and powerful, reputation is everything, and hers had been shredded by her own ambition. And now here she was, watching the girl she once called just a cleaner take the stage to applause she could only dream of. Mia didn't gloat. She didn't need to. Her presence was enough. Her transformation was her triumph. Later that night, Donovan found Mia on the rooftop, the city glowing beneath them like a sea of golden opportunities. He handed her a glass of sparkling water, and they stood in silence for a moment, the kind that feels full of meaning even without words. "You ever imagine this?" he asked. "Not even once," she replied, a quiet smile on her lips. "But I imagined getting out. I just didn't know where I was going." Donovan looked at her, proud in that quiet, mentor-like way. "You know what the real wealth is?" he asked. "It's not just money. It's being able to turn your story into someone else's ladder." And that's exactly what Mia was doing. She'd already sponsored 3 new applicants to the Second Sight program. 2 of them were single mothers. One was a young man fresh out of prison trying to rebuild his life. She mentored them personally, not because she had to, but because she remembered. Remembered the cold tile floors, the late-night sobs, the feeling of being invisible even when doing everything right. She didn't just rise. She pulled others up with her. That's the kind of millionaire she had become. Not just wealthy in bank accounts, but in purpose, in impact. And maybe, just maybe, that's what made her richer than anyone else in the room. Months passed, and Mia's influence kept growing, not just within the company, but far beyond the corporate skyline. Universities invited her to speak. Nonprofits sought her voice. A best-selling author even reached out offering to co-write her story. But through it all, Mia stayed grounded. She still took the elevator to greet the janitorial team by name. She still packed her own lunch most days, not because she had to, but because she never forgot who she was before the spotlight found her. What changed wasn't her values, it was the size of her impact. The same hands that once scrubbed tiles now signed partnership deals. The same eyes that once avoided mirrors now looked forward, with certainty and fire. But the most emotional moment of her journey came quietly, away from cameras, in a small retirement home on the edge of town. Mia visited someone she hadn't seen in years, her mother. The woman who once whispered encouragement after every late shift, who sacrificed her own health and comfort to keep Mia's dreams alive. Her mom had grown frail, time slowing her steps, but her eyes still sparkled with pride. "I heard you became a millionaire," she said with a grin. Mia laughed softly. "Something like that," she replied, then knelt beside her, tears in her voice. "But what I really became was seen. I became seen, Mama." Her mother reached out, touched her face and said, "You always were. The world just needed to catch up." Those words echoed later that week, when Mia was honored at a global leadership summit. Standing on a stage flanked by tech giants, heads of state, and elite entrepreneurs, she was asked, "What's the one thing that brought you here?" She didn't speak about strategy or luck or hustle. She said one word: compassion. And then, after a pause, she added, "You can't measure compassion in dollars, but you'll feel it in every fortune that lasts. Money without empathy is empty, but money with meaning, that's power." Mia's story became a living reminder that resilience is the most valuable currency. And sometimes, the richest people aren't the ones who start with wealth, but the ones who transform pain into purpose, shame into strength, and silence into legacy. Mia went from cleaning offices to reshaping an entire corporate culture, from being bullied in the shadows to being celebrated on global stages. So when you hear someone say you can't rise from nothing, remember her name. Remember that millionaire doesn't always mean yachts and private jets. Sometimes, it means grit. It means grace. It means beating the odds with your heart intact. If this story moved you, let it live on. Drop a like, subscribe to this channel for more emotional stories like this, and comment below. What did this story awaken in you? Your voice matters here. Thank you so much for watching. See you soon.